Some betrayals come with a knife. Mine came with a phone call from my own son on a Tuesday morning. While I was drinking coffee on a porch he thought he had already taken from me. Dad, we've made a decision. We're listing the cabin. You need to be out by the end of the month. He had no idea I wasn't even standing on the property he thought I was. He had no idea what I'd been sitting on for 7 years. And he had no idea that by the time this was over, the $400,000 he thought he was about to pocket would look like pocket change compared to what he was about to lose. My name is Walt Devereux. I'm 71 years old, a retired structural inspector, and a father of 2 sons I raised with my own 2 hands on a piece of land in northern Michigan that most people would kill for. I moved to Larkspur, Michigan in 1981, the same year I married my late wife, Colleen. She was 23. I was 29, and neither of us had 2 nickels to rub together. But we had something better. We had patience, and we had each other, and back then that felt like enough to build a whole life on. We bought a modest house on Pine Hollow Road for $34,000. Colleen thought I was reckless for taking on the mortgage. I told her, give it 10 years. She didn't believe me, but she signed the papers anyway, because that's what marriage is, believing in someone even when. The math doesn't add up yet. We raised 2 boys in that house. Derek came first in 1982. Sam came 6 years later in 1988. I taught them how to change a tire, how to read a level, how to frame a wall so it wouldn't shift in 50 years. I taught them the value of things that take time to build and even longer to earn back once they're broken. We buried a golden retriever named Biscuit under the maple tree in the backyard when Sam was 12. I remember him crying so hard he couldn't breathe, and Derek, 16 at the time, sitting next to him without saying a word, just being there. That was Derek once, before things changed, before the rust started. This story isn't about that house on Pine Hollow Road, though. This story is about 2 cabins, 2 lakes, and 1 son who moved too fast, got too greedy too quickly, and forgot that his father didn't just build things with his hands. He planned them. Every single one. In 1994, I bought a lot on Ashford Lake, 16 miles outside Larkspur, for $28,000. It was raw land, no structure, no road access worth mentioning, just trees and water and a slope down to the shoreline that any engineer would tell you was perfect for a foundation. Colleen thought I'd lost my mind. We had 2 young boys, a mortgage on the main house, and I wanted to sink our savings into a swamp lot 40 minutes from civilization. Give it 20 years, I told her. She rolled her eyes, made me a sandwich, and told me if I bankrupted this family over a fishing hobby, she'd bury me next to Biscuit. That was love. That was Colleen. I built that cabin with my own 2 hands over 2 summers. Derek was 10 the first summer, old enough to hand me nails and complain about the mosquitoes. Sam was 7, mostly getting in the way, but happy to be there. By the time we finished, that cabin had become something more than a building. It became the family's anchor point. Every 4th of July fireworks display over the water. Every deer season opener with 3 generations of boots tracking mud through the kitchen. Every birthday party that needed more room to breathe than the house on Pine Hollow could offer. When Colleen got sick in 2016, ovarian cancer, stage 3 by the time they caught it, we spent her last good summer up at that cabin. Derek and Sam drove up every single weekend that August. We sat on the dock in the evenings and mostly didn't talk. We didn't need to. Some silences carried more love in them than any conversation could. Colleen passed in March of 2017. She was 60 years old. After the funeral, that cabin became something sacred to me, a place where I could still hear her laughing at the water, still smell her sunscreen on the porch railing, still feel her hand on my shoulder when the light hit the lake just right in the evening. What I never told my sons, what I never told a single living soul except one man, was that 8 months after Colleen's funeral, I bought a second property. But we'll get to that. By 2023, Derek was 41 years old. He'd been divorced once, in his early 30s, and remarried to a woman named Vanessa 4 years later. Vanessa was attractive, sharp-tongued, and had a talent for spending money that hadn't been earned yet. She ran a boutique staging business for real estate listings, The kind of job that requires constant reinvestment and constant debt if you're not careful. From what I understood, they weren't being careful. Sam was 38, unmarried, working as a project manager for a landscaping company 2 towns over. Sam was the softer of my two boys, the kind of man who avoids conflict the way other men avoid fire, not because he lacks strength, but because he learned early that peace was easier to maintain than truth. I love my boys. I want to be absolutely clear about that before anything else in this story unfolds. I love them the way you love something you built with your bare hands from nothing. But I had watched Derek change over the years, slowly, the way rust eats through a fence. You don't notice it happening in real time. You only notice it once the whole structure is compromised. It started small. A comment here, a question there. At Thanksgiving in 2021, he asked me, almost casually, whether I had a plan for the Ashford property once I was not able to maintain it anymore. I was 69 years old at the time, in better health than most men 20 years younger, and the question landed strange in my chest, like a splinter you can't quite locate. At Christmas the following year, Vanessa made an offhand remark about how lake property up north has gone through the roof, and how some families just let equity sit there doing nothing. I remember looking at Colleen's photo on the mantel and thinking, she would have had something sharp to say to that woman. I noticed all of it. I filed it away. I didn't say anything, because a man learns, eventually, that the moment you announce you've noticed something is the moment the other side starts covering their tracks better. I just watched, and I waited. It started on a Sunday morning in late October, 2 days before the call that would define this entire story. Derek called at 9 in the morning. His voice had that particular tone, careful, rehearsed. The tone he used as a teenager right before confessing he'd wrecked the family car. Hey, Dad, you got a minute? I'm not going anywhere. Derek, what's up? Listen, Sam and I have been talking. Here we go. I thought. About what? The cabin. The Ashford place. He cleared his throat, the same nervous tic he had since he was 16. Dad, look, you're 71. You're up there alone most weekends now. The property taxes have gone up almost 30% in 3 years. The dock needs work. The roof's got maybe 5 good years left on the shingles before. Say what you're actually saying, Derek. A pause. We think it's time to sell it. You think it's time. I repeated slowly. It makes financial sense, Dad. The lake market up there is insane right now. People are paying stupid money for waterfront. How would you know that? Silence. That specific silence of a man who has walked further into a conversation than he meant to. Derek. Sam and I, we talked to a realtor. Guy named Pete Sorensen, works out of Petoskey. He came out and looked at comparable sales. He thinks we could get for $110,000, maybe more if we time the listing right. I set my coffee cup down very slowly. You talked to a realtor, I said. Before you talked to me. We wanted to have information before we brought it to you, so you'd have the full picture. The full picture. My son had invited a stranger to walk through property I built with my own hands, appraise it like livestock, before he'd said one single word to me about it. Is Sam there with you? Yeah. We'd put him on. Shuffling, muffled voices. Then Sam, quieter, already sounding sorry before he'd said a single word. Hey, Dad, this your idea. Sam? I mean, we talked about it together. It wasn't just, that's not what I asked you. A long pause. I could practically hear him deciding how much of the truth to give me. Derek brought it up first. He finally said, but I think, financially, it could help both of us. And you? I mean, if you ever needed. I've heard enough, I said. I picked my coffee back up. My hand wasn't even shaking, which surprised me a little. Dad, don't be like that. We're just trying to look out for. I'll call you back. Dad, I hung up. I sat on that porch for the better part of an hour. Just me, a crow working over something in the gutter, and a silence with real physical weight pressing down on my chest. Was I angry? Not yet. Anger takes a moment to catch up to grief. Because that's what it was, grief. My boys, the same to boys who'd handed me nails on that dock, who cried into my shoulder at their mother's funeral, had gone behind my back, hired a stranger, and started pricing out my life like it was a used car. But here's something nobody tells you about being 71 years old. You stop reacting. You start responding. There's a difference, and it's a big one. I went inside. I made a third cup of coffee I didn't need. I sat down at the kitchen table on Pine Hollow Road and opened the bottom drawer, the one Colleen used to call my serious drawer, because nothing good or light ever came out of it. Inside was a manila folder. Inside that folder was a deed, not the Ashford Lake deed. The boys knew about that one, knew every square foot of it. This deed had a different address, a different lake, a story they knew absolutely nothing about. I read it slowly, even though I had every line memorized. For the first time all morning, I smiled. 2 days passed. I used them wisely. I called Harold Bishop, my oldest friend and the only man alive who knew about the second property. Harold had spent 31 years as the county clerk before retiring, and there wasn't a land record in 3 counties he couldn't find in under an hour. Harold, I need a favor. You always do. Walt, what is it this time? I need you to quietly check if a listing agent named Pete Sorensen has filed anything on the Ashford Lake property. There was a pause on the line. Then the particular chuckle Harold gave when he already knew something ugly was unfolding. Give me 20 minutes. He called back in 14. Walt, there's a pre-listing agreement filed with the county assessor's office, dated 11 days ago. Derek's name is on it as authorized seller contact. There's also a comparative market analysis attached. Sorensen ran numbers on your place 3 weeks before that. 3 weeks. Which meant Derek had gone to a realtor before the Thanksgiving conversation the year before had even finished digesting in my chest. Now, before that phone call I just had with him, he'd been planning this, quietly, methodically, for nearly a month before he'd said a single word to me. I thanked Harold and hung up the phone. Sat with that fact for a long moment. My son hadn't had a moment of impulsive greed. This wasn't a spontaneous idea born out of a bad conversation about property taxes. This was a plan, weeks in the making, which meant somewhere in those weeks, he made peace with the idea of taking something from me without asking. That hurt more than the phone call had. Derek showed up at the house on Pine Hollow Road that Wednesday evening, unannounced. He had a manila folder of his own tucked under his arm, comparable sales printouts, a market summary from Sorensen. The whole polished pitch. I let him in, poured him coffee he didn't touch. Dad, I want to walk you through the numbers. I think once you see them, you'll understand why. I don't need to see numbers to understand what you did, Derek. He stopped mid-sentence. You went to a realtor before you came to me, I said. Weeks before, according to the paperwork on file with the county. His face did something complicated. Surprise. Then the fast calculation of a man realizing he'd been caught in more than he thought. Dad, I was just gathering information. I wanted to have real numbers before. Before what? Before I could say no. He didn't answer that, which was its own answer. Look, he said, shifting tactics, voice softening into something that sounded almost gentle, almost concerned. Vanessa and I have been under a lot of pressure lately. Her business had a rough year. We've got some debt we're trying to get ahead of. And I keep thinking, Dad, you're up here alone. What if something happens to you at that cabin and nobody knows for days? What if, is this concern for me, Derek? Or is this concern for your debt? The silence that followed answered the question more honestly than he ever would have out loud. That's not fair, he finally said. No, I agreed. It's not. None of this is. He left 20 minutes later without touching his coffee, without an agreement, and I noted, without an apology. I sat at that kitchen table a long time after he left. Colleen's photo watched me from the counter, the same soft smile she'd had in every photo from the last good summer we had together. He's under pressure, I said out loud to the empty kitchen. That doesn't make it right, does it? The house didn't answer, but I already knew what she would have said. Pressure doesn't make a man dishonest, Walt. It just reveals what kind of man he already was. The following Tuesday, the call came at 8:14 in the morning. I remember the exact time because I glanced at the clock right as the phone buzzed, Derek's name lighting up the screen. I was sitting on my porch, not the porch at Pine Hollow Road, a different porch entirely, one facing west, overlooking water that Derek didn't even know existed. Dad, we've made a decision, he said, and his voice had shifted into something harder, something final. We're listing the cabin. We've already signed with Pete. You need to be out of the Ashford property by the end of the month. Puz, we're doing this with or without you. I let the silence stretch, long enough to be uncomfortable. The way a held breath stretches right before lightning cracks. Derek, I said finally, which cabin do you think I'm calling you from right now? There's a particular kind of silence that isn't empty. It's loaded, the way the air feels heavy right before a storm breaks. That's the silence Derek gave me. Dad, you're at Ashford. I didn't say that. Then where are you? I'm exactly where I need to be. Derek. I leaned back in the chair. The wood creaked the comfortable way old, well-built things creak. You go ahead and list Ashford. You and Pete Sorensen. You do all of that. Dad, you're not making sense. I make plenty of sense. You're just not used to listening to me. I paused, watching the light shift across the water in front of me. We'll talk soon. I hung up. Let him sit with that. Now let me tell you about the second cabin, because this is where the story turns, and this is the part neither of my sons had any idea existed. In March of 2018, 6 months after burying Colleen, when the grief was still raw enough to taste, I got in my truck one morning with no destination in mind, just me, a full tank of gas, and Michigan doing what Michigan does in early spring, which is look beautiful and miserable in the exact same breath. I ended up 39 miles northeast of Larkspur, past the county road where pine trees grow so thick they choke out the afternoon light, at the edge of the small, quiet lake called Windrow. It didn't show up in any tourism guide, the kind of place that stays quiet because the people who know about it prefer it that way. There was a property for sale, a corner lot, elevated above the waterline, which any structural engineer will tell you matters more than most buyers ever realize. The structure on it wasn't a cabin. It was a proper lodge, 3 bedrooms, a stone fireplace, a wraparound porch that faced due west, which meant every single evening delivered a sunset worth stopping for. I bought it in April 2018 for $240,000, paid in full. Colleen and I had been savers our entire married life. We drove used trucks. We never once bought anything we couldn't pay for outright. Derek used to call that philosophy old-fashioned. Derek thought a lot of things. I placed the Windrow Lodge inside an irrevocable trust, the Colleen Devereux Family Trust, with myself as lifetime beneficiary. I used a separate estate attorney out of Grand Rapids, someone the family had never met and never would through ordinary channels. I told exactly one living person about that property, Harold Bishop. He kept that secret for 6 years. Never once asked me why. That's what a real friendship looks like, the kind that doesn't need explanations to hold weight. My son spent those same 6 years circling Ashford Lake, asking about my plans, eyeing that property like an inheritance they were already owed on some invisible ledger. The entire time, the real prize sat 39 miles away. Quiet, patient, waiting, like me. The Ashford listing hit the market on a Wednesday. Harold called me within the hour, his voice carrying the particular tone that means brace yourself. Walt, Ashford Cabin just went live on the MLS. Listed under Bradley, Derek Devereux as co-owner. Asking price for $102,000. I exhaled slowly. How fast is it moving? Already got 3 showing requests. Market up there is hot right now. Sorensen's a decent agent. They might close this in 3 weeks. All right, Harold. Let it run. You sure about that? Walt, I'm sure. If they close on this sale, then they close. Harold, let it run. He went quiet for a moment. You're a cold man sometimes. Walt Devereux, I'm a prepared man, I said. There's a difference. I want to stop here and explain something important that neither of my sons understood. Yes, I was on the Ashford deed, co-owner alongside both boys. An arrangement I'd set up years earlier thinking it would simplify things down the road. What I had never explained to them, because it had never come up, was that co-ownership on a Michigan deed does not allow one party to unilaterally authorize a sale. Every party on that deed has to sign the closing documents. Every single one, including me. Pete Sorensen either didn't know this or didn't bother checking. He took Derek's word that the family was united. He listed the property. He scheduled showings, and within 18 days, he generated a real offer, A couple from Chicago, Marcus and Elena Henderson, both in their mid-40s, looking for a weekend lake house away from the city. Good people, probably, caught in an entirely wrong transaction. Their offer came in at $400 to $1,000. Derek called me that evening, practically vibrating through the phone. Dad, we got an offer, a strong one. 402. I said. Dad, for $102,000. I heard you. Derek, we just need your signature on that. He stopped. I could hear the gears turning. The slight hesitation of a man realizing the room he'd walked into was shaped differently than he'd expected. On the closing documents, it's just a formality. Since you're a co-owner, they need all signatures. It's just how it works. I let that breathe a moment. Let him hear his own words echo back at him. Derek, I said finally, do you remember what I asked you last week? What? I asked you which cabin you thought I was calling you from. Dad, what does that have to do with anything? Everything, I said. It has everything to do with everything. I'll call you Thursday. When do the Hendersons need an answer? What I didn't fully understand yet. What came out over the following days through a call from Sam, of all people, was exactly how deep Derek's financial trouble ran. Sam called me tonights after that conversation, his voice low, like he was speaking from somewhere he didn't want overheard. Dad, I need to tell you something, and I need you to not repeat where you heard it. Go on. Vanessa's staging business is basically underwater. She took out a business loan against their house 18 months ago, expanded too fast, and it hasn't recovered. They're behind on payments. I heard her on the phone with Derek 2 weeks ago. She was crying, saying if they didn't come up with money soon, they were going to lose the house. Derek told her not to worry, said he had a plan. The plan being Ashford Lake. My cabin, sold out from under me, funding his wife's failing business and saving their marriage from foreclosure. Why didn't he just ask me for help? I said, mostly to myself, would you have helped him if he'd asked honestly? Sam said, it was a fair question. Painful, but fair. I don't know, I admitted, but I would have respected him for asking. Sam was quiet for a moment. I told him this was wrong, Dad, weeks ago. He said you'd never even notice until it was already done. Said you never go up to Ashford in the winter anyway. That detail, small, almost throwaway, told me everything about the calculation Derek had run in his head. He planned this timeline specifically around the months I was least likely to be watching. Thank you for telling me. Sam, are you going to stop it? I looked out toward the dark water of Windrow Lake through my window. I'm going to let it finish, I said, all the way to the end. Thursday came. I drove to Grand Rapids for an 11 o'clock appointment with my estate attorney, Priya Anand, 49 years old, sharpest real estate mind in 3 counties, and a woman who genuinely enjoyed a well-constructed legal surprise the way some people enjoy theater. I laid the full picture out across our conference table. The Ashford listing, the offer, Derek's calls, the deed structure, the financial pressure from Vanessa's failing business. All of it. Priya leaned back, fingers steepled, studying me the way a chess player studies a board 3 moves from checkmate. Walt, she said slowly, they listed a property they cannot legally sell without you. Correct. And the buyer is sitting at 402, waiting on a closing date. Correct. And your son called this a formality. His exact word. A small, precise smile crossed her face. And the Windrow property, a revocable trust, recorded 2018, Grand Rapids County. Unreachable, I confirmed. She nodded slowly. So what exactly do you want to do here? I folded my hands on the table. I want to let it get all the way to the closing table. I want Derek to shake that man's hand. I want Sam standing there in his good jacket. I want Sorensen to lay out his folder full of documents like he's already won. I paused, and then I want you to make one phone call. Priya looked at me a long moment. You planned this. I planned for the possibility, I corrected. There's a difference. She laughed, an actual laugh. Walt Devereux, you are a genuinely terrifying man. I'm a prepared man, Priya. She reached for her legal pad. All right, let's talk about that phone call. The closing was scheduled for a Monday morning, 9 a.m., at a title company in Holland, Michigan. Clean office, decent coffee, the kind of place where enormous amounts of money change hands with very little ceremony. Derek had called me twice over the weekend to confirm I'd be there. Once to ask if I needed directions. Directions to a town 40 minutes from my own house. He genuinely thought the old man might be losing his grip. I told him I'd be there. I arrived 12 minutes early. Derek walked in 3 minutes to 9, wearing his good navy jacket. Sam trailed behind him, hands in his pockets. Eyes darting around the room the specific way Sam's eyes moved when he was uncomfortable in his own skin. The Hendersons were already seated, pleasant, hopeful people. Marcus had a firm handshake and the energy of a man who'd been looking forward to this closing for weeks. Sorensen sat at the head of the table with his folder, efficient and ready. The title officer, a woman named Diane Marsh, had documents stacked and organized with practiced precision. I sat in the corner with my coffee. Derek saw me and visibly relaxed. His shoulders dropped. He smiled, that particular smile of a man who thinks he's already won. Dad. He crossed the room, hand extended. Glad you made it. I shook it. Wouldn't miss it? So we're good. We're good, Derek, I said quietly. He returned to his seat. Diane Marsh began her opening remarks. Sorensen uncapped his pen. Marcus Henderson leaned forward, ready. My phone buzzed. A text from Priya, ready when you are. I stood. Every head in the room turned. Walt? Diane said, is everything? I apologize, I said, calm as a Sunday morning. There's a call I need to take. My attorney. She needs to speak with someone in this room. I looked directly at Sorensen. Specifically you. He blinked. Me? You? Derek half rose from his chair. Dad, what is a sit down? Derek. Something in my tone. Something final. He sat. I stepped into the hallway, called Priya, and 30 seconds later walked back in and handed my phone to Sorensen. I watched his face as she spoke. Watched the color drain out of it. Watched the pen slowly lower to the table. Watched the exact moment a man realizes the transaction he built is standing on nothing but air. He said 3 words into the phone. Say that again. Silence. He handed my phone back. Looked at Derek. Looked at the documents laid out in front of him. Looked at Marcus Henderson, whose expression had shifted from excitement to alarm. Mr. Devereux, Sorensen said carefully, and he was speaking to Derek now, not me. This closing cannot proceed. Marcus's chair scraped back. Excuse me? The property cannot be transferred without unanimous co-owner consent. Full, documented, verified consent. Sorensen's voice stayed controlled, but his jaw had gone tight. There's a structural issue with this transaction that should have been caught at listing. Should have been caught at listing. Attorney language for this is your fault. Derek turned to me, slowly, the way you turn when you already know exactly what you're about to see. Dad, I picked up my coffee, took a sip, and let the silence do what silence does when it has something to say. You know what your mother used to tell me, I said. She said, Walt, you think 6 steps ahead and you never tell anybody. She meant it as a complaint. I set the cup down. Turns out it was a compliment. Sam put his face in his hands. Marcus Henderson was already on his phone, calling his own attorney. Sorensen stared at his folder like it had personally betrayed him. And Derek just stared at me. My oldest son, 41 years old in his good navy jacket. What did you do? He whispered. I smiled, the first real, full, unhurried smile I'd had in weeks. Son, I said, we haven't even gotten to Windrow Lake yet. The Lakeland conference room had gone from a closing to something closer to a crime scene. In under 4 minutes. Not the kind with tape and badges. The other kind. The kind where everybody slowly realizes something has gone terribly, irreversibly wrong. And the only question left is who has to answer for it. Marcus Henderson stood, composed but visibly working at it. I want to understand, he said. Are you telling me this sale cannot close today? Diane Marsh looked like she wanted to dissolve into her chair. Mr. Henderson, there appears to be a co-ownership issue. We've been under contract for 3 weeks. We paid for inspections and appraisal. My kids have already told their friends about the lake house. His wife touched his arm, but he kept going. We drove up here from Chicago. Sorensen raised both hands. Mr. Henderson, I understand your frustration completely, and I want to assure you we'll get to the bottom of The bottom, Marcus said flatly, is that you listed a property you apparently didn't have the legal right to list. Silence. Sorensen left first, saying nothing except a tight-jawed word to Diane about following up Tuesday. The door closed behind him, with the specific sound of a man about to have a very unpleasant conversation with his broker. The Hendersons left second. Marcus stopped at the door and looked back. Not at Derek, at me. I'm sorry this happened to you, he said. Enjoy whatever lake house you find, Marcus. He almost smiled. Diane gathered her documents with the quiet efficiency of a woman who'd watched transactions collapse before. She was out in under 3 minutes. Then it was just us. Me, Priya, who'd arrived by then and was waiting in the hallway, Derek, and Sam. So that's it? Derek's voice had changed completely. The confidence had drained out of it, and what was underneath was raw, younger, almost familiar. You let it get all the way here. Let us list it. Let us get an offer. Let us sit at this table. Yes, Dad. Yes, Derek, I did. He pushed back from the table, walked to the window, stood with his back to me, hands in his pockets. You could have stopped at any time, he said. You could have called me after that first conversation and said, Derek, you can't sell that property without me. You could have just said that. I could have, I agreed. He turned around, and I want to be careful about how I describe what I saw on my son's face, because it wasn't just anger. It wasn't just embarrassment. It was something more complicated. A man who had looked in a mirror and seen something he wasn't prepared for. Why didn't you? He asked. Because you needed to see it, I said. Not hear it, see it. All the way to the end. I held his eyes. You hired a realtor before you asked your father's permission. You signed a listing agreement on property that had my name on the deed. You called me to say I had a deadline to get off land I built with my own hands. I paused. What exactly did you think was going to happen, Derek? He had no answer. Sit down, I said, not cold, just final. He sat. I looked at both of my boys. Derek in his navy jacket, Sam with his hands folded like a man in a church he no longer believed in. I'm not going anywhere, I said. I'll be at Ashford Lake every deer season until my body decides otherwise. You are both welcome there. That hasn't changed. Sam exhaled, eyes wet at the corners. Derek thought the Hendersons are going to sue. Not me. Not Sam. Though his name might get pulled in depending on how their attorney structures it. Primarily you, because you signed the listing agreement. You entered a purchase contract on property you had no unilateral authority to sell. I paused. Priya estimates their claim, inspection costs, appraisal, travel, legal fees, somewhere between $18,000 and $24,000. Derek's jaw tightened. That's not catastrophic, I continued, but it's not nothing, and Vanessa is going to find out. She already thinks this is done, doesn't she? For $100,000 and $2,000. She's already spent some of it in her head. He said nothing, which was its own answer. That conversation is yours to have, I said. I won't interfere with your marriage, but I want you to understand, every consequence sitting in front of you right now has your name on it. Not mine, not Sam's, yours. Because you moved first. You moved fast, and you moved without asking the one person whose name was actually on that deed. I turned to Sam. I know you didn't start this, I said. I know Derek came to you with a plan already half-formed, and you went along because that's what you do. Because disagreement makes you uncomfortable, and Derek makes disagreement feel like a personal attack. Sam exhaled, shaky. But son, you're 38 years old. You are not 7. Standing in the driveway waiting to see which way your brother runs before you follow him. I leaned forward slightly. You knew this wasn't right. I heard it in your voice on that first phone call, and you did it anyway. That matters. I know, Dad, Sam said quietly. I know. Good. I sat back. Then what I'm about to tell you won't come as a surprise. I reached into my jacket and placed a folded document on the table between us. I didn't unfold it yet. Just let it sit there. I spent yesterday morning with Priya, I said. We made some changes. Derek's eyes came up slowly. What kind of changes? The kind a man makes when he realizes he needs to be more deliberate about his legacy. I kept my voice even. The Ashford Lake property, the cabin you listed, the cabin you handed a stranger the keys to without my knowledge, I've restructured the deed. It's now held solely in my name. Both of yours have been removed. Dead silence. Dad, Sam started. It's done. Already recorded at the county courthouse as of yesterday afternoon. I looked at Derek. You wanted to sell it so badly. Now you can't, because it's not yours to sell anymore. It never really was, but now the paperwork agrees with that fact. Derek's hand curled slowly into a fist on the table. Not aggressive. The way a man's hand curls when he's absorbing something that physically hurts. In the Windrow Lake Lodge, I continued, the Colleen Devereux Family Trust. I've updated the successor beneficiary designations. I finally unfolded the second document, sliding it into the center of the table. Harold Bishop's daughter runs a land conservation nonprofit out of Traverse City. Beautiful organization. They preserve working waterfront properties across northern Michigan. Keep them wild and accessible to the public. When I'm gone, Windrow goes to them. The air went out of the room, not all at once. Slowly, like a tire losing pressure, like two men realizing simultaneously that the thing they'd been circling for years, the thing that had made them hire realtors and sign listing agreements and call their father with deadlines, was never going to have their names on it. Not ever. Derek pushed back from the table, walked to the window again. Same window, same parking lot view. Everything outside it had shifted, though. A nonprofit, he said, flat. A nonprofit, I confirmed, Dad. He turned around, and here's where I want to be precise about what I saw, because it wasn't rage. It wasn't entitled frustration. It was something rawer than that. Something I hadn't seen on Derek's face since he was a teenager who'd broken something he couldn't fix. I didn't think it would go this far, he said. I know you didn't. I thought we were helping. The taxes, the maintenance. You're up there alone. Derek, my voice stayed gentle, but it didn't move. You hired a realtor before you asked your father. Whatever you tell yourself about your intentions, that's the truth of what happened. A man who's trying to help asks first. Sam was crying quietly now. Not loudly, Sam never did. Anything loudly, just two slow tracks down his face he didn't bother wiping away. Is there anything left? Derek asked, and he meant it the way his son means it, not the way an heir means it. For just that moment, he wasn't 41 in a navy jacket. He was 10 years old with sawdust on his shoes, handing me nails on the floor of an unfinished cabin. I leaned forward and folded my hands one last time. Derek, Windrow Lodge was appraised last month. I let the silence sit a second. $1.3 million. The number landed like a stone dropped in still water. I watched it ripple across both their faces. That property you never knew existed, I said slowly, so every word had room to breathe. 39 miles northeast of Larkspur, on a hill facing west, with a wraparound porch and a stone fireplace and a sunset that'll make you believe in something again. That was going to be your inheritance. Both of yours, divided equally, the way your mother would have wanted it. Silence, the kind with physical weight. You were about to sell Ashford Lake for $402,000. I let that number sit next to the other one so they could feel the distance between them. Split to ways. That's $101,000 each. I looked at Derek directly. You threw away $650,000 to get to $101,000. Sam made a sound, not words, just a sound. The kind that comes out of a man when something hits a spot he wasn't protecting. Derek made no sound at all. He just stood at the window and did the math he should have done before he ever picked up the phone and called a realtor. I wasn't hiding Windrow to punish you, I said quietly. I bought it because I needed something that was mine. Something that still felt like your mother. Something nobody could put a price on. I paused, but I always intended for it to reach you eventually. When I was gone, when it was time, that's all it ever was. You got impatient, and you rushed the timeline. And in doing that, you changed the destination entirely. I buttoned my jacket. $1.3 million, I said one final time. Not to twist the knife. Just to make it real for them. Fully real. The way consequences need to be before they mean anything. That was going to be your inheritance. Hope it was worth it. I picked up my coffee cup one last time. Cold now. I drank it anyway. You're still my sons, I said. Both of you. That doesn't have a deed. Nobody can list it or sell it or show up at a closing table and take it away. I paused at the door, but it has to be earned back. Derek, call an attorney today, not tomorrow. I looked at Sam. And Sam, go home and sit with what you know about yourself after today. Don't run from it. Sit with it. I walked to the door. Dad, Sam's voice cracked at the edges. I stopped, turned. We're sorry. He said, and he meant both of them. I could see Derek's shoulders drop slightly at the window. His version of agreement. His version of sorry. I nodded once. I know you are. I said quietly. I know. I wish I could tell you it ended cleanly there. It didn't. 3 weeks later, Priya called me with news I half expected. Derek hired an attorney, she said. A man named Curtis Beale, out of Petoskey. He's floated the idea of challenging the Windrow Trust, claiming undue influence, or that you weren't of sound mind when the trust was amended. I sat with that for a moment, not shocked, just tired in a way that settles deep in the bones. On what grounds? None that would hold up, honestly. You've got 7 years of documented, consistent trust administration, independent legal counsel at every step, and a mental competency evaluation on file from your last estate review 2 years ago. Standard practice. But it helps enormously here. Beale knows this is close to unwinnable. I think this is more about Derek needing to feel like he tried everything before he accepts it. Will it cost me anything? Time, mostly. Maybe a few thousand in legal fees to respond formally. I'll handle it. It never went further than a strongly worded letter that Priya answered in 4 paragraphs. Beale advised Derek to drop it within 2 weeks. Whatever pride had pushed Derek to try. It wasn't enough to survive contact with the actual paperwork. I found out later, through Sam, that Vanessa had been the one pushing for the legal challenge. When it collapsed, something in their marriage collapsed along with it. They separated 5 months after the failed closing. I didn't take satisfaction in that. I want to be honest about that. There's no version of this story where watching a marriage fall apart feels like winning. 3 days after the closing collapsed, the Hendersons' attorney reached out. Priya negotiated on Derek's behalf, more out of practicality than kindness. A prolonged lawsuit would have hurt everyone, including me, since my name was still technically on record for the collapsed listing period. The settlement came in at $21,000. Derek paid it out of savings that, as I understood it, had been earmarked for something else entirely. Vanessa did not take the news well. Whatever the something else was, it evidently mattered to her more than she'd let on. Sorensen received a formal complaint filed against his real estate license. With the state licensing board, I didn't file it. The Hendersons did, on their own, after their attorney reviewed how the listing had been mishandled from the start. Some consequences don't need your help. Arriving, they find their own way. Sam called me the following Sunday. No agenda, no angle, just his voice and mine. 40 minutes of the kind of conversation we used to have before money ever entered the picture. He called again the Sunday after that, and the one after that. 6 months later, those calls had become a habit neither of us mentioned out loud, but both of us kept faithfully. He drove up to Ashford Lake for deer season that November, same as always, and we sat on the dock in silence the way his mother and I used to. He didn't bring up Windrow. Neither did I. Some things don't need to be discussed twice. Derek and I talked less, not from bitterness, from distance. The kind that takes longer to close than a phone call can manage. He sent a card at Christmas. Just a card, no letter. I kept it anyway. I drove out to Windrow Lodge that evening, after everything at the title company had finished. As the last of the December sun went flat and gold across the water, I sat on the west-facing porch, just me, the lake, and the kind of quiet that costs nothing and means everything. Colleen, I thought, you would have had something to say about all of this. You would have shaken your head at Derek, felt every bit of Sam's tears like they were your own, probably told me I was to calculate it for my own good, that a man doesn't need 7 years of silence to prove a point. Then you would have handed me a sandwich, because that was always how you ended an argument you'd already won. I poured a drink and raised the glass toward the water. This one's yours, I said out loud. All of it always was. The lake held its ground the way it always had, still, unhurried, settled. Like the man who bought it, the Ashford Lake cabin still stands 16 miles outside Larkspur. My name is on the deed now, just mine, the way it always should have been. The Windrow Lodge remains exactly where it's always been, on a hill facing west. Inside a trust that no one can touch when I'm gone. It goes to people who will love it without ever trying to praise it. Harold Bishop came up for a weekend in January. We sat on that porch and watched the ice start to form at the edges of Windrow Lake and didn't say much of anything for long stretches at a time. That's the thing about real friends, real places, and a life built deliberately and protected fiercely. They don't need a lot of words. They just need to last. And this one will.